Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up.
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands.
Where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands.
upcoming tours,
And show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
The top 3 stories of the week.
Welcome back to All That Jam, where music has no limits, and our weekly recap. We're going to be modifying what we did before and paring it down to doing the top 3 stories of the week and keeping the interviews as whole interviews now on YouTube, because that has been seeming to work very well. How are we doing today, Amanda?
Hey, Kevin. I'm doing great, and happy Monday to you. It's start of a new week.
Yeah, bright and early.
That's right. Especially out here. But that's good. Want to get a jump start on everything, and very excited to be bringing this back. I always enjoyed talking about just some of the news in the music industry, whether it's jam bands, more general music news. It's great. So I'm excited to kind of jump back in and see what's going on out there.
Yep. So this past couple weeks, I've been laying low. It's hot. It's been like 100 and some degrees with the heat index here. Have you been out getting around doing anything out there in Colorado?
Ago, I saw Daniel Donato. They opened up a really fun Saturday lineup at Red Rocks featuring Corey Wong and his band, they're amazing, and then Umphreys. And so that was Daniel Donato's first time at Red Rocks, and it was awesome. They did a great job.
Very nice. It's got to be crazy to walk on stage for the first time at Red Rocks and look out on that crowd.
Yeah, and so because of the early start time, when Red Rocks does those three slots, right, instead of just a more traditional kind of opener headliner, the show starts pretty early. And so we got in there pretty much right at doors at 5:30, and we saw the band and all their family and friends taking pictures behind the stage. And it was super cool. They were so excited.
I can only imagine. It's neat.
Very cool. Yeah, I was very happy for them. And they made the most of it. They do a good festival kind of set, or an opener slot set. They make you really feel like you're getting as much from them as you can in that amount of time. So it's always impressive.
There you go. And then this past weekend, I guess, was Widespread weekend there, right?
That's right. I want to say that this weekend marked their 70th headlining slot at Red Rocks, which I know is the most of any band there. I think Dave Matthews holds Alpine Valley. Certain bands just kind of continuously come back, but Widespread has just over many, many years rocked Red Rocks for a long weekend. And yeah, I had a lot of friends there. I didn't go, but I'm happy for everybody that was able to get there.
Yeah, only time I've ever seen Widespread was at Red Rocks, opening for Blues Traveler back in, I guess, 94, 4th of July.
Okay. Yeah. So that was probably just after like the Horde tour, because that's where I first heard of them, was on Horde tour. And me, living in the Southeast for a long time, I've gotten to see them all over that part of the country. Never at Red Rocks, though. Actually, no, I've been to a couple of the shows there, but weather traditionally, for whatever reason, has not been great for my Panic weekend runs. And I end up soaking wet and usually in the parking lot trying to avoid hail.
I hear you with that. So that probably ties in weather a little bit to one of the 3 stories that you threw at me before we came on. You want to jump into them?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So one of the things that's come up in the past in multiple ways is this idea of music festivals and just that part of the industry itself. Is there kind of this trend really happening that we're seeing more festivals cancel? Does it just feel that way? Sometimes it might just be a perception that something's going on. But there's some articles that came out recently, not just about the United States and the kind of festival scene here, but internationally. And so I thought I could just talk through some of this information because it made me realize this is a much bigger picture situation than even, our jam band scene, which we know we have a lot of festivals, but of course that happens across the world and across a lot of different genres of music. So recently in Digital Music News, this was actually a week ago today, there's an article that said music festivals are facing an extinction event. And this was a report from Australia and the UK. So completely unrelated to anything happening here in the States. A few weeks ago, there had been a report that over 40 music festivals in the UK have announced either postponements, cancellations, or just a complete closure in 2024. And that came from a group that I just learned about called the Association of Independent Music Festivals. And what they do is they track the health of these long-standing but local music festivals and venues. Ireland, I guess, saw the highest number of cancellations. But I guess the purpose in all of this is that music festival promoters, bands, anyone involved in this are experiencing really hard times. Also, they mentioned even, in the US, staples like Coachella, which we talked about, are witnessing this demand that's really gone soft compared to what they have been used to. So this is happening in other parts of Europe. I think I saw something also that dozens of festivals, I think about 60, have been canceled in other parts of Europe alone. So this is definitely something that I think we want to be watching. And Kevin, before I get into any more of these data points, I guess I'd say, is this surprising to you that it's happening elsewhere?
No. I don't think that it is. The global economy follows what we're doing, I think, generally, and we've seen prices skyrocket for everything and ticket sales be soft. Nobody wants to put out money 6 months ahead of time. So no, I don't find it surprising. But I don't know. I feel like, I guess you don't hear about it as much is part of the thing because it is Europe. You're bringing it obviously to my attention there. So you don't think about all the festivals that are over there, just Glastonbury, the huge names, things like that. Right. So this is all local, right? You said that this tracks like smaller festivals and things like that.
Yeah. So I think that you could probably align, from what I'm reading, a lot of the festivals that are mentioned in these articles to some of the more regional jam band festivals that we talk about. It's probably similar to those.
Right. Now, something got canceled this past weekend that was supposed to have members of Mel playing with Max from the Ominous Sea Pods, and canceled it on Monday. It was supposed to be last Friday.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there's so many reasons for that. Can be health related. There could be family issues happening. Bloomberg News, though, had posted something. This is back in March. I hadn't seen it then, but exploring this same topic. And they had an article that basically said, obviously that the music festivals canceled to that point, and in general, just reveal these rising costs of producing large events. So that is not a surprise. However, Bloomberg actually brought up some interesting festivals too, ones that I don't know about. Riverbend Festival, which I guess has been going on for 40 something years. That is not happening this year. That's something I think in Tennessee. So more country music, but it is happening across the board. And so here's some information about that. So these troubles, according to what I've read, are mirroring other businesses. Again, not particularly surprising, but to actually read some data points on it helps us, I think, place this squarely within bigger picture kind of topics out there on the economy. Theme parks, casinos, there's just tighter budgets after that initial post-pandemic surge, right? So once we all were let out of our cages, we've actually talked about this. There was some data that showed people were willing to put festivals and concerts on credit cards more than in the past, willing to kind of go that way just to be able to have experiences, right? And so basically there was a quote that said, concerts are basically the equivalent of a flight somewhere now, especially when you're paying hundreds of dollars. And on average, going to a multi-day music festival, I think for most people is well over $1,000. And that's not even eating. So, you have to kind of take all that into consideration. I guess my thought on all of this is, I don't know in the US if there's a kind of an association like we were just hearing about overseas, but there's this cannibalizing that happens for promoters of us, of music fans, because there's so much happening or planned at one time. I don't know if it would ever be possible to have a little bit more organization, but the problem is you have these, AEG and these other huge companies that tend to dictate where festivals or shows can happen and when. So I don't know how easy it would be for these smaller festivals to be able to kind of pay attention to this and try to help each other out, even by not scheduling too close to each other or over each other or stuff like that.
Right. A centralized database might help.
And there is actually a music festival wizard website. It's interesting when I start kind of going down the rabbit hole of looking at these topics, the things that I find. There is a website that tracks, but that's a trailing type of data point. It's not something that I think artists would use to plan necessarily that far ahead. But I agree with you, because it would really be in everyone's best interest to not have to keep postponing, canceling when it's possible to do that. Right. But I know there are companies out there who are trying to have conversations about the environment of festivals. And the Bloomberg article mentioned some organizers trying to consolidate as larger promoters to try to get a little more power, to maybe book bands.
Like a collective?
Yeah.
Right. Nice.
Yeah. So, it's something that I think we can all relate to for sure, and see if, if there's going to be any changes to that in the next couple years, or if in general there'll be just less out there to have to make decisions about.
Yep. We'll keep our eye on it.
Yeah. So that's a topic that I know, again, has kind of come up here and there. So I think what I wanted to spend some time talking about also is, of course, Phish released an announcement, I think just last week, that number one, they were confirming, I guess, what's going to be the 8th Riviera Maya experience, but then also confirming that they will not be doing a fall tour. And it's funny because I saw this pop up in so many different places before I had seen the official announcement. And at first I thought, is this legitimate? But yeah, it is. So Kevin, what are your thoughts on them not doing a fall tour?
I think you're going to get something with Trey. He'll do some kind of mini tour. I think they're making the move. It's going to be, instead of being 6 sets plus an afternoon set like last year in Mexico, the year before it was only 5 sets. Now they're doing 8 full sets over 4 days. Mondegreen, 8 full sets, 4 days. Dick's, I think next year we're going to see the 4 shows in Mexico. The next thing they'll announce will be 8 Sphere shows. There'll be a small summer kind of tour, Dick's, and I think going on, and then New Year's, that's going to be the thing.
Right. Which maybe we could actually look at this in some ways in relation to what we were just talking about. Maybe there's just different ways to imagine a typical kind of touring calendar for the year. And this could be something different, to your point, that gives them more flexibility. Because, who knows what else might be in the works for any of them, but especially Trey, of course. Trying to remember, was it 2 years ago that the Taboose run happened?
Yep, exactly.
It was 2 years ago. Yep. So, I know there'll be surprises coming out there. I think leading with that information, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people I know and a lot of threads I saw online were filled with financial relief. People were actually saying, I hate that they're not touring, but I'm also a lot happier because my bank account / family / whatever is going to be much better off. So that in itself also shows this push and pull of, we want to go see so much music, but we're feeling it, and that feeling of missing out on something, I understand it, it leads us to make financial decisions that in some ways I think people are happy not to have to make for the fall.
Exactly. I think that the Taboos, if something like that happened again, though, Trey would be the opener.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would be Goose opening for Tab. I think they play the bigger arenas, and it would be Goose as the headliner. I don't know if Goose would even do that now, though.
I'm not sure. I think it probably still could happen, just in the sense, you see all kind of levels of bands sometimes doing things like that or splitting a bill, but I don't know. Goose is one of these bands that there's still so much strong emotion for on either side for fans and people that for whatever reason just seem to really have a lot of anger about what they're doing. I can't say anything else other than it does always seems pretty angry to me. Just people love to hate on them. And actually, Kevin, that's maybe a lead into this last story for the week. So this last story, I had to figure out how to get behind a paywall for, which is always fun. But anyway, we got that. So this is from Billboard News, and this is June 10th, so just a couple weeks ago. So the article is titled, "The Music Business Wants to Reach Superfans. Jam bands already know how." Well, duh. Yes, we know that, right? But I guess more and more, which makes sense, mainstream artists and festivals are trying to figure out how to maybe replicate what the jam band scene has: devoted fans, fans that are open, as we always talk about, right, to like different styles of music under that umbrella. And so my first thought was, well, this is no surprise whatsoever, but to see something in Billboard that so specifically references jam bands, to me, I thought was kind of interesting. And Goose, actually, Peter from Goose is huge picture right at the top of this article. They mentioned Peter Shapiro and the Wetlands and kind of this history, right, of jam bands just being able to support themselves because of the fans. And so it's interesting because there's a lot of kind of jam bands OGs mentioned in this article. Mike Luba, who's been the manager of String Cheese Incident forever, for a really, really long time. And they do talk about festivals. They have Dave, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, one of the co-managers of Goose, who mentions Eggy, pigeons playing ping pong. And he says at festivals, you're seeing jam bands pop up on lineups that are traditionally more for indie rock or other kinds of bands. And that's something new. And in his opinion, that's great. Goose can make that shift maybe a little more easily than some other bands in the scene, though.
Yeah.
I
guess the problem, my thing is mainstream. When mainstream says to me, the people who do that are looking for larger audiences. Now, sure, you have super fans of Spafford, and Spafford can stay on the road and, tour year in and year out and put out albums and things like that, but they're never going to be rich. I think they're just working class musicians, and that's what the super fans are supporting. If they're looking at jam bands as a model in order to create some huge success and, we're going to come see your show night in and night out, I don't think that that's going to work because they aren't going to be willing to do the things necessary in order to create the super fan, i.e. not doing same set lists, expanding things out,
Right. Well, and in a way, because of the fact that in large account, jam bands haven't gotten support from the traditional, mainstream music industry, they haven't had to depend on record sales or even streaming maybe the way that other types of music has. You know, when you think about things like gaming or other spaces where you have really, really intensely devoted fans, music it's not monetized well in the same way. You know, there's just models that are not really bringing connections between artists and followers, but jam bands figured that out a long time ago. And so I don't know how possible it would be to replicate a model, if you want to call it a model, like what's evolved, you know, for decades upon decades now. But I think the fact that it's being discussed in something like Billboard shows that there is attention. I can tell you, Billy Strings, I think, is one of the artists that came to my mind immediately as someone that could really do something like that crossover, just from what I've seen of his fan base and the rise that he's had.
Yeah. I mean, he's the one. He's definitely the one. The crossover to country is so huge. I mean, Goose is crossing over. They're billing themselves as indie alternative groove or something like that, which I find is a strange moniker to try to pigeonhole yourself at, but I think that there's a much smaller audience. Goose has a very intense fan base right now, but it's small and it's, you know, the same people over and over again. I think, you know, even more so than Phish. You know, you don't get people who just go to see Phish in one town. It seems like a lot of people are traveling with Goose. They found them to be the last great American adventure, I guess.
Seems like it. And you're right. There's a level of dedication there that's impressive. For Billy Strings, you know, I didn't actually realize this because I don't follow his stuff as closely as other bands, but I didn't realize he signed to Warner's Reprise Records.
No.
I didn't know that. But, you know, yeah, I mean, he's had Grammy nominations for Roots Performance, Country Duo, you know, so yeah, he definitely feels like somebody that could more easily go between. There was one more thing, though, I did want to mention. This is Karina Reichman was interviewed in this article, too. And she talked about herself, Volpec, some other artists, and the way she described them, in her opinion, is she said, "We're not jam bands with capital J's." And I thought that was actually really interesting. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know if I would have ever thought of it that way, because I think the point is there is really no capital J, right? The whole point is that jam bands it's diffused. But then she made some good points. She said, for the bands she referenced, she said, "We don't play 2 sets. We still play 3-minute songs, but jam band fans still appreciate us and will come out to see us." So that was kind of an interesting distinction I probably wouldn't have thought of.
Right. Well, we had talked about a few months back when she toured with Gorilla Toss about her trying to get away from being the jam band and them trying to open themselves up to people who like jam bands, because they are not considered that. So
that's right.
Label.
I know. Well, everybody, you know, human condition. I will just end with this because, Kevin, you and I have talked about this a bunch of times. So to see it in print in something like Billboard was really interesting. So Ben Baruch, you know, also co-manager of Goose, as well as a lot of other bands. He's representing the Disco Biscuits these days. The last quote of this article was basically saying that for the Disco Biscuits, in the last 18 months, they have grown more than they have in 20 years.
Right.
We know that, you know, we heard that from the source, but to see it mentioned here, I thought was just another validation that there is still so much energy and support out there for the music.
Yep. And hopefully it will continue. Hopefully more people will discover it. Maybe that's the best thing the mainstream could do is open the door to some of these bands that people are completely off their radar, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, you know, as I kind of sit and look out at schedules coming, you know, for the fall, left and right, and trying to, you know, make my payments for Strings and Soul, right, and all that. Life is about choices, and I think that in the next year or so, depending on what happens with the economy, dare I say the word election, it's going to be very interesting to see what ultimately survives and how promoters and others are going to get probably even more creative with
Right.
the ideas that they have to just continue reaching fans.
Yep. Yep. And we will be watching. So make sure that you follow us on social media. Check out our YouTube page where we actually have the live interviews as they happen. We're releasing whole interviews in our archive series on the podcast itself. And on Mondays, make sure to check in for this show every Monday. Not sure exactly what time, but we're going to try to be consistent, maybe try to get it out by noon Eastern. Maybe it'll be noon Pacific. Who knows?
It's always noon somewhere, right?
It's always noon somewhere. There you go. There you go. And with that,
thanks.
And with that, I will say, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. We'll talk to you soon. See you, Amanda.
All right. Have a great start to your week, everybody.